We constantly hear about fixing things. We must fix this, we must fix that, we must fix our health, we must fix our relationships, we must fix our partners, friends, marriages, children, in politics, the country, and the latest flavor of the month. We must fix the planet, or the climate. All these I notice and have been noticing for some time follows the same pattern as what I noticed growing up in the 80s, 70s, 80s, where there was a constant declaration of war against something. War on this, war on drugs, war on that, war on other nations, across the globe, somewhere we couldn't even pronounce or let alone spell. War, war, war. A person you hear, a loved one, has cancer, the doctors declare war on the cancer. Yes, we're going to do some tests and we're going to start lopping off, or just chopping off, removing, cutting things from your body. This and that and that and this. And we're going to give you this. We're going to put you on radiation, we're going to therapy, we're going to put you on chemo, we're going to give you these medications, we're going to give you that. Another form of war. If you look at it, if you just zoom out, pull yourself a little bit further back from sticking your nose into and becoming completely identified, merged with whatever this new battle of yours is, and just observe as you're panning out, zooming out, removing yourself ever so slightly from becoming fixated on this situation, whatever it is. Then you start seeing things differently. One of the things you will see is the futile attempt at trying to fix things from the outside. What I mean by that is trying to jump in from the outside, trying to add something, adding something onto the thing and making it go away. I gave the gross, coarse, brutal example of a war, for example. You know, like somebody coming in from the outside, another entity, another person, another factor, going in, trying to do things to bring a sense of harmony into that, whatever that harmony is in their minds. Not the locals, by the way. Whoever's coming in and raping this culture, this country, whatever it is. Similarly to the body. Yes, we're going to go in, and it's very intrusive. Using the scalpel to open up the spine, to go in there and fix something that could be fixed by less invasive, less brutal means. I don't have to put that poison in me yet. But the first sign of, oh, there's something wrong with your health, so we gotta go in there and remove that. Well, there's also nature, you know. We're part of nature. Nature can do wonders. Does it have to be 100% of the time? Where we have to go in and we have to take this medication, we have to take this medicine, we have to take this drug to fix this. Or maybe I need to change my diet a little bit. Maybe I need to add more water in my... Maybe I'm not drinking enough, not hydrating enough. Do I really have to take that laxative, for example? Do I really have to go get that knee surgery simply because my knees hurt? It might be a ligament, maybe it might be your IT band. It might be you're sitting a lot, maybe, because you might have, if you sit a lot, which is the case for most of us these days, living in the 21st century in big cities, one part of the body is the muscles are contracting, the other parts are lengthening unnaturally because of us becoming more used to and forcing the body into these unusual positions for long extended time periods. So the body has to have it has an impact on the body. Looking at, glancing at, not glancing, but just being fixated on the computer screen or your phone. Scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling for hours and hours. And then complaining that you can't sleep. So it's always attractive to come in from the outside, to try to come in, and it's easy, and it's cheap, and it's lazy. And it doesn't fix anything. Rarely does it fix anything. So we want to heal. We want to heal the body by cutting it open, by doing things. Listen, sometimes it has to be done, of course. There's something there that's, you know, there's, I don't know, somebody's got a gunshot wound or something, a poisonous something entered the body. You need to remove it. You need to make that incision. Yes, but you don't go like, you know, really go crazy on thinking that that is the first step. No, it's not the first step. It's not the first step. I have been, you know, I've gone under the knife so many times since I was a child. I mean, growing up in Lebanon, being injured, coming this close to death, losing parts of my body, where I lost count of how many operations I had. I used to make a list of how many times I, you know, just like a prisoner does those marks on the wall in isolation chamber. How many days has it been? Because no one's coming in to tell them the days. I used to do that mentally in my mind of how many operations I had. Until one day I realized I lost count. So I know what it means to be on the operating table. But I'm here, you know, I'm still here. And some of those surgeries were helpful. This is not to put it down, but what I'm after is this allopathic or this symptomatologic approach, meaning trying to fix the symptoms, which comes from this external to the internal to fix it. The internal is supposed to be just accepting whatever is coming in from the outside. We have to put this in there. That system over there is not working, and we have to bring you this, our system, to fix you over there. This is the basis of, you know, foreign policies and you know, around the world, not just now. It's been like that for ages. But it's functioning on greed. You have some resources. I'm going to make up every excuse under the sun to come in there and rape, pillage, take, and put you in slavery. That system is still functioning. It's very healthy still. Healthy in the sense that it hasn't lost its momentum. That's still functioning. And that is basically at the core of wanting to, what I was saying, we have to fix this, we have to fix that, we have to go in there and do this. Go in there from where? That already infers that I'm coming in from the outside. Where? In to something else. And I mentioned something about relationships, fixing relationships, fixing the planet. Everybody's trying to do something with, yeah. They don't even have a clue what it is, because the reports are so, you have paid off individuals in big time institutions around the world. The biggest names in academia have been bought and paid for, and everyone knows this. I've been in academia for quite some time in the past. So whoever pays the biggest grant, guess what? We're not living in some just system. It's, money talks. And most academicians are actually in need of money for programs, for research, for this, for that, for salary to pay their mortgage. These are people. They're not going to hold themselves to higher moral values. That's delusional. Most of them. Because there's demands on them as well. Otherwise they will lose their tenureship and all that, and they will lose their jobs. These are people. They have fears. Unfortunately, the first thing that goes out the window is morality. Holding themselves accountable to some higher ethical standard. And that's what's missing. This is at the basis of the problems in the world. And this is also at the basis of relationships between people. Instead of trying to fix each other, trying to fix, quote unquote, the planet or heal the planet, we have to learn how to rehabilitate our relationships. We have to rehabilitate our relationship with ourselves. We have to rehabilitate our societies with a different way of looking at things. Not from the outside in, which is very intrusive, which is very ugly. It's symptomatological in its approach, meaning it goes after the symptoms, not the causes. It's stupid to think that, oh, if I go and stop them from going and driving their cars, and everybody should drive an electric. Are you nuts? Are you okay? They had electric cars over 100 years ago, by the way. And what is the electrical car running on? No one seems to be asking the question. We have to turn everything, alternative energy, green energy, this and that. Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Let me see what's happening with this green energy producing things that are out there, such as, in my travels, I've seen wind turbines from the planes that I've been on. I'm looking down and I'm seeing wind turbines in the middle of the ocean, on hilltops, in fields. Wonderful. Okay, I've seen them when I used to live in Los Angeles. I see them sometimes on the freeways. These huge, white, basically, the what do you call it? The propeller type of thing. Each of them would be longer than a truck sometimes. And I would say, wow, this is so amazing. The human, ingenuity. What was that? So in just dragging that thing up a hill, or wow, this is wonderful. And then you find out the ugly truth. We never ask what happens to these. Do these things last forever? At least 50 years? At least, 75 years? No. You see them dumped and hidden under camouflage, under some foliage in the middle of nowhere. These things that were supposed to actually help the environment. Well, what happened? What are we doing with the cars that are being pulled away from the roads? At the excuse that we're still going to be using tires, we're still going to be using fossil fuels, not to run the car, perhaps, but to run the stations that will give eventually down the line all the way to those centers where you go ahead and plug your electrical car or hybrid car into, thinking that, yeah, this juice is coming in from the sun or somewhere else, from another alternative dimension. No, it came from fossil fuels, genius. They still are dragging the oil, the crude oil, from this place and that place, and dragging it from one part of the earth to the other after thousands of miles of traveling, running the possibility of spillage. So there's a lot of, we are very selective in our wanting to think a certain way. Whatever is being talked about, suddenly the human mind on massive scale in society wants to convince themselves at their own detriment that this must be true, and I have to make it true in my mind. I have to make it true in my mind. People during the time of Hitler were seeing the atrocities at the time of Hitler. The Germans in Germany, and Italians at the time of Mussolini and other fascist countries. The public, the ordinary person, as well as the intelligentsia, they were seeing what was really happening. But contrary to what many hundreds of millions of people have been thinking and convincing themselves these past 2-3 years, and continue to do so, brainwashing themselves is what I'm talking about. That's the worst kind, when you are convincing yourself, no, despite the facts, despite what you are feeling to be incorrect, ethically, morally wrong. Well, that doesn't stay in someone else's backyard. Sooner or later, that trash, that rubbish, at least the smell, is going to start to come inside your bedroom, inside your child's crib, where you sit down and eat. That's what's been happening, to the point where it's now permeated into our very thinking, even worse, into our bodies. So if we're going to heal anything or anyone, we need to start with rehabilitating ourselves. That means to do a major overhaul of your thinking. What is it that you're thinking? But that's another thing that they have already thought about decades ago, and they had started to attack educational systems around the world, dumbing down societies. That's what we have. People today, adults, so-called educated people, with degrees and all, unless they have done their own work on themselves through self-education, despite what this, the herds of people are doing, are being, just following along. That's the self-brainwashing. Despite all that effort, they have kept themselves strong. Aside from those individuals that are far in between, few in between, what we have is a population that is dumber a generation ago, this generation. And the one previous to this generation was actually, and is, much less smarter, much less creative, much less justice seeking, harmony seeking than the generation before, prior to that. And what we're also doing is we're becoming less able to use our hands and fingers. We're becoming less creative, where it's this whole thing about AI and virtual reality. What it's doing is it's leading us, not just children, into being normalized, into thinking that this is what there is to life. If something happens, and let's say there's a famine, or the things that you have today are no longer there as a means to live, with which you can continue on living and providing for yourself, your family. How do you do it? How do you go about creating it? You have to use your brain. You have to use your body. Sooner or later, you need to go ahead and at least learn how to make fire. You need to go ahead and you need to sit down and have a major master class with tribes in other parts of the world where they don't have that, never had that. Recently I found out that 900 million Africans don't have electricity. Imagine. No one knows about this in the Western world. At least not that much. We used to think, oh, some villages here and there, maybe 1 million or 2 people tops. No. In fact, you don't have to go to Africa to see such huge numbers. Other parts of the world as well, in the Northern Hemisphere. So, one thing that is necessary, I mentioned rehabilitation. You need to rehabilitate yourself first if you're going to rehabilitate your relationship with your husband, with your wife. And that's another thing we need to be talking about. People talking about my partner. You know, what is that? See, even the language, they've invaded. They've normalized us. In fact, I've had, even during sessions, I've had people sitting there when I was a layman as a couples therapist, and people would talk, either individually or about my partner, whether the so-called partner was present or not. And I would see the sense of guilt every once in a while. There would be a slipping of, they would say, instead of my wife, they would quickly correct themselves and police themselves and saying, my partner. I was like, a few times I was confused given the context, or the lack of, and I thought actually they were talking about their business partner or something. This is unnatural, okay? The same way they're invading the minds of children to uproot, to eradicate the sense of morality from children's minds, which they know exactly what they're doing, by the way. This probably is the last. I was talking with one of my students the other day, and he said, Bhante, this is the last generation, isn't it, of people who have touched, who have known what it means to be ethical, to be moral, to know what is right from wrong. Because the next generation is already, they're working so hard to pollute, to invade the minds of children, to confuse them, to the point where anything goes. Anything goes with this whole gender thing, with this whole sexuality thing. If you convince people to relinquish their moral duty, at least to live the kind of life oneself to respect one's own body and say, no, I'm not going to agree to this. This is my body. This is my body. Leave it alone. You have yours. Go deal with that. I'm taking care of this body. I'm feeding it. I'm taking it to the bathroom. I'm washing it. I'm the one who raised it, educated it. Leave me alone. Go deal with yours. But people have allowed others to come and tell them what they should do and not do with their bodies. That's one. The other thing is how they think about their body and society at large, between people. Confusion is now being unloaded or uploaded into the minds of children. And society, if it's going to save itself, it better move fast. Finally, build a spine for yourself and really stand up. Because this is really ugly. If you know, there's a term called pushover. One of the ways that Hitler and others have done what they've done is basically, in Buddhism we call it Mara. Evil one. Hitler was just a human being, of course, but the evil one is a presence. It could be manifested in anyone who comes in and tries to, including your own minds and thoughts, including your own tendencies, negative tendencies. We have a term called nivarana, which are the hindrances. But we also have the presence of, you know, everything is going well, and you have this, all of a sudden, this sudden invasion of harmful, unwholesome, negative, evil thoughts. Well, you can let it run amok of your life, or you can actually take control. How? You first need to identify that there is such a thing and quickly close the door. That's the first part of four-parted right effort. You close the door so that the rats don't come in. The rats could be anything. It could be the news. It could be the negative news, which most of it is absolute 100% rubbish. Rubbish. You have people, hundreds of millions of people. Remember the thing I said about self-brainwashing? Many people we know, people that are in our lives, family members, friends, religiously sit in front of that tube full of lies, and they believe it, and they want to believe. That's how the people in Germany, people in Italy at the time of Mussolini, people in other parts of the world where fascism was, imperialist Japan and other places. By the way, these are no longer in history, pages of history. These last 3 years have proven themselves that these time periods are still, these tendencies are still there in people. Just like individuals in Germany were trying to convince themselves that Hitler was a saint. He was, quote-unquote, cleansing the country, doing what is necessary. That same attitude, that exact same attitude I saw decades later, not in history books this time, but in my conversations with so-called educated, well-rounded, quote-unquote, responsible, quote-unquote, members of society, well-educated. Many of them with master's degrees. CEOs of companies. People in the helping professions. Well, they looked straight at me in the eye and said, no, this is not like Germany. And I said, what? This is exactly what they would have said had we gone there in a time machine and asked them on the street, in the streets of Berlin. Do you realize what you're proving? People are being sent to the gas chamber. What are you doing? Stand up. This is wrong. You're seeing something, your own neighbor being mistreated, people that you grew up with. People are being taken away. But they themselves had been convincing themselves to the propaganda as being true. The same thing today. So the first thing, close the door, stop the rats from coming in. Shut the mainstream media. That's number one. Second, get rid of whatever is in there that is part of the mainstream media. That includes your own ideas. That these are the best ideas we got. When you know that they're not proving themselves, your body is a mess. You believe them, look what happened. And stop making excuses. You didn't take responsibility for what was happening. You didn't think it through. You just quickly believed and you gave up valuable relationships. You didn't think. Remember the minority I mentioned? The individuals who do their work, really, really do their work, ask questions. The asking questions part is what will take you away from being a symptom remover to a cause remover. That is true healing. That's where true healing happens. That's what distinguishes Lord Buddha from everything else, everyone else. Because he gave us the actual step-by-step process of how one can attain happiness, attain harmony, not by going and invading some other country or someone else's mind, trying to convince them otherwise of your insidious and insipid and evil tactics. Anyone who believes that the mainstream media is telling them the truth is just, sad to say, is an idiot. People saw things, I remember, for at least 25 years or so. More than 25. Seeing things and they're like, yeah, but did you see what just happened on the screen? This is, yeah, but let's avoid that. Let's look at this. Then you don't deserve your eyes. You don't deserve that brain if you're not going to use it. But that's not going to take us to the next level of evolution. We are being dumbed down and we're not doing anything as a population. Fortunately, there's a movement now in the world. People are waking up to their mistakes and saying, okay, I see it, so now I have to... They're becoming able to see and smell that rubbish coming in, the fumes, this ugly, nasty. Okay, what can I do? And no, you cannot seal your own doors shut while adding more rubbish or agreeing to the rubbish next door. You have to get your hands dirty. You have to speak up. You have to at least have a different position. And one of the best ways to do that is saying what is wrong as wrong, instead of just gulping it down, even though you know in your heart of hearts this is wrong, but saying nothing. Our ancestors did not bring us this far. They didn't survive genocides, famines, wars, various injustices around the world, different cultures, so that we end up dying in like a flock of animals, or being pushed down a conveyor belt towards a slaughterhouse. That's not what they wanted for us to happen. They didn't struggle for thousands of years to get us here for this. We need to deserve the brain we have. So, we need to rehabilitate ourselves. Just like when a person rehabilitates themselves through physical therapy, learning, teaching those muscles how to work properly again. Get out more, go into nature more, see the sun, which they're trying to block. I cannot even believe that. Whatever, I remember in the 90s when the movie The Matrix came out, I had a feeling that this would be coming, but like most people felt, I'm sure, many people at least, but we didn't think that it was going to happen in our lifetime. And now, with a straight face, they're getting up on TV and they're saying it. Yes, Europe or somewhere else or anywhere else, they're seriously considering dimming out the sun. What? Who gave you the right? Where's the science behind it? I'm not talking about the scientists that are being nicely well fed by these grants that are coming in from dubious places. Gates Foundation, that foundation, this foundation. Which completely means it's not even science anymore. And you have this huge, ignored, but very big community of proper, real, good scientists who are practicing due diligence, who are real scientists. They do practice the scientific method through and through. Courageous men and women who are saying, it's not true. There's no evidence of that. In fact, 8,000 years ago, the world, the earth, was 2 degrees Celsius higher in its temperature than it is now. So what are you talking about? Global warming. And what are your solutions? Oh, people need to not use this, not use that. Meanwhile, they go to their meetings in their private jets. Private jets. Even flying first class, which they don't even do. Put them in one single, passenger jet. All of these big heads of state, or these big time, individuals, including some of those paid off scientists. Put them in one big jet and fly them to their conference, wherever it is. Can they do that? Meanwhile, they talk big while they, cheer and drink their champagne, enforcing and squeezing this population that has seen so much abuse. And it's getting worse and worse. It's getting more into a tighter and tighter bottleneck. People have to be awake as to what's happening. This is wrong. This does not help society one bit. Starting with our children. So you need to rehabilitate children. Stop relying on the system to educate your child first. So when you are applying sila, in Buddhism we call it sila, which is following a certain set of rules, precepts for yourself to be a decent human being, the way you like to be treated, like the Buddha said. Also Jesus said that 500 years later, 550 years later. Follow that system. Oh, it's a wonderful system. If you like the way someone treated you, treat them like that. If you don't like the way someone has treated you, don't treat them like that. Your children will see this. And children are excellent. They are excellent at spotting frauds among us, as well as honesty. So if you're being truthful, the child will see that. And definitely they will see your kindness. You don't have to rely on Disney or some show on, Sesame Street, whatever, which are all being like propaganda now for their own agendas. You don't have to rely on these things for your child's education. Stop relying on this virtual digital nanny, which is taking your child away from you. It's taking your child away from us. Us meaning humanity. I've seen this in education, as an educator, as a teacher, for over a decade, when I saw how one class after another, there was this lack in humanity, less of a desire to consider the feelings, the presence of the other student, from one class to the next. So the 12th graders were better off in their treatment of each other than the 11th graders. And then the same goes down, down, down. And I got scared as to where this humanity is going. So rehabilitating oneself starts with practicing of moral virtue, having a virtuous life. And as I was saying to a group of students the other day, when you're living a truly virtuous and moral life, you're not taking anything away from anyone else, from someone else. Actually, let me correct that. You are taking away violence from others' lives. You are taking deceit from others' lives. So those people in Germany, in fascist countries in the 30s and 40s and other time periods, or actually even now, since 2020, 2019, what people have been doing is deceiving themselves and deceiving each other. They were seeing cruelty, injustices around them, but they were choosing not to see it. That is what we're living in today, and that's what's happening. So there's nothing noble about. Yeah, sure, we'll do that when my child comes and says, "Oh, I'm a cat now." It's just, yeah, it's you know, they're just expressing themselves. Snap out of it. Wake up. Become grounded again. What is this stupidity of yours? My child wants to be a four-legged animal. Really? Until when? Until they decide to? Until there's a bigger four-legged animal attacking it? This is just nonsense. And it's interesting how these things are actually have started and are permeating around the world, spreading from, as they say, first world countries, countries that are well fed, compared to other countries that are barely able to find food. You're not going to find a child in sub-Saharan Africa or in Afghanistan or somewhere in the Middle East, or a man who's walking around wearing something that is, you know, anybody under the sun would look at, that's unnatural. Behaving things that are unnatural. They don't have the time for it. They're struggling to find food. So these stupidities start from usually Western countries, where it's more affluent than others, because they don't have anything to do. They haven't been in actual wars for, well, entire generations. So they don't have any idea of urgency, of what it means to go hungry at night. They have no idea what it means to have bombs falling on their homes, if they have a home. Let them go and spend 1 month in Palestine. Let them see what it feels like to live on an island where you don't know if there's going to be food coming in. Your dad, your uncles, your brothers go to get some fish, because that's the only thing that you sustain yourselves on. And you don't know if they're going to come back empty-handed or with a few fish, you know, just for us to eat that day. Because the island doesn't have any more fruits and things. It is sad that we still go after the symptoms and not the causes. So let us pull ourselves out of this and rehabilitate. And that, I guarantee it. Not just me. Lord Buddha says, when you have closed the doors on unwholesome effects to come in, like the rats, I gave the example of rats. When you close the windows, the inlets or the holes that they can creep into your house, that's already the big step. Then you remove any rats that you are still lurking about and you toss them out. Once it's cleaned up, from that, you really start to do the work. And this is when you introduce wholesome qualities in you. One of the big ones, I already talked extensively, I think, is the introduction of moral values in your life. Again, moral values is not somebody else coming over and saying, don't do this. That actually attitude was what we have seen during the last 3 years, and it's still continuing on. People on the media, people in governments come up and tell you how you're going to live, far superseding their authority. What you're going to do with your body. You will follow this. Well, wait a minute. I'm the one who's breathing here. How long are you going to be squeezing me? I'm not just a consumer, despite what you believe. Where are my freedoms? Can't I breathe? I mean, you're polluting the sky. I was walking the other day outside and I saw a web. They really started to, crank up and really push this chemtrail business. I could hardly see the blue sky. There's so many zigzagging lines overhead. For how long are we going to pretend this is not happening? This is not polluting me. How is that? What are you spraying? Really? What are you pushing down my throat? And, pushing into my veins? Pushing into the minds of our children. So it's time for us to wake up. One of the best ways, that's my attempt here, one of the best ways that you can do that is to rehabilitate yourself. Again, the example I'm giving is that of building morality, bringing it, reintroducing into your life and into the life of your children, your family. This is how the relationships are rehabilitated. This is the best way to heal, the surest way to heal absolutely our environment. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. Without going and invading or blocking somebody's path on the road that they're struggling so hard to go and work and get some food on the table for their child. All these those attempts are so futile, they're in fact disruptive, while giving you the impression that you are holier than thou, than the other person. Absolute nonsense. So when you're introducing morality into your life, you're basically saying, no matter what happens, I'm not going to raise a hand on you. I'm not going to kill you. I'm not going to harm you intentionally. Second, no matter what happens, whatever you have, I'm not going to come and steal from you. I'm not going to take what is not freely given by you to me. This is the second precept. The third one, no matter how excited I get sexually, sensually, I will never come and rape you, take someone against their will, someone who's under the protection of someone else, someone who's young. I will never do that. You're promising this to yourself. The same thing for your body, by the way. Most people forget this. Third rule, third moral code, that undertaking, it's called a training. You are training yourself not to do these things. The fourth one, not to deceive, which is this culture's biggest asset, I guess. And that's what politicians are doing. That's what Bill Gates can say, getting up with no degrees, no nothing, with no education, nothing. No expertise, except deceiving. With the wealth that he's being handed, to get up and say, oh, by the way, there's going to be another phase of this, and then we're going to have to take more of this, and then I'm going to make, by the way, flat out, in your face, I've actually quadrupled or my 20 times more. I put 1 billion in this investment, and I got 20 billion back. Playing roulette with your life, not his children. People have deceived themselves so much that they're just smiling and saying, yeah, sure, yeah, whatever. Stop deceiving yourself. That's the fourth precept. Don't speak falsehood. Idle chatter is another one. Speaking gossip and slandering and with the intention to harm. Pure and simple. And then the fifth one, not to take anything that will delude the mind. And that is why, no surprise, Right? As they say, surprise, surprise. Several years ago when they started to legalize marijuana, legalize drugs, and now they've even been pushing psychedelics. Even well-meaning individuals, well-educated people, notable individuals are pushing for that because the human brain it's an attempt to kind of wake us up into another reality. I see that point, but in the long run, that is simply deluding the mind because you are not removing the person from whatever is happening. Sooner or later, they're going to fall on their behinds with no change. And now they want to go back to that state you just introduced to them for a few minutes or an hour or a few seconds. You're just creating an addict. You're not giving a solution. It's not a solution. It simply deludes the mind. Meditation changes you. Practicing sila, building yourself, appropriating for yourself and your family a moral backbone, being virtuous, builds that. And the fourth effort, the first one I said, closing the doors for the rats not to come in. The second one, to remove whatever remnants or the poop of the rats and things, all the nastiness, remove those. And then the third one was to now introduce something that is the opposite of that, meaning something wholesome. And the fourth here is the maintenance of that, making sure your house is clean. That means your thoughts, your words, your language. If you're struggling with weight, you don't just practice 5, 10 push-ups once, that one time, 3 months ago, and that's it. You go back to eating junk food. No. You say, okay, I did 10 push-ups. I'm going to try doing them every day, and I'm going to cut out carbs. I'm not going to eat processed foods. Sugars, which, by the way, is in everything nowadays. Everything that don't even need sugar, which is another form of addiction, to make people fat, which makes you, by the way, depressed. When I tell people psychologists have been on board with these propagandists, but these people who have been driving humanity down and into this terrible path that we're in now, they're shocked. Psychologists and sociologists are the first to be blamed for this, because they would do the studies and they would come back and report to their bosses who have paid them and saying, if you do this, then you will be able to program people like this. Herd mentality, this mentality, they won't ask you questions. I mean, Hitler had them on staff, on retainer, probably. Every advertising company hires psychologists. It's called one of the, unless they came up with new ones, industrial psychology. Yeah, they're the highest paid, initially when they come out of school, they're the highest paid psychologists, students, with no experience, even. So it's time for us to really wake up to our role in rehabilitating ourselves, despite the outside conditions. So you see, the main person you have control over 100% is you. And by fixing you, you fix the planet, you fix your relationships. Otherwise, when I see you and my mind and my approach is all messed up, when I see you, I'm not going to see you the way you truly are. My vision is completely flawed. I will judge you, I will criticize you, I will want to change you. Remember those warmongering countries who go and try to steal and take away to change, to bring so-called democracy and ruin people's lives and then leave them in shambles and they go back to invade another country? That's what we are. From relationship to relationship, we are giving each other major headaches. We're traumatizing each other. Why though? We ourselves are traumatized. By whom? First and foremost, ourselves. Yes, the situation you grew up in, circumstances might have traumatized you. Fine. But that was done in the past. Trauma happens in that sense. You ask to any trauma specialist, they will tell you. The event of the trauma itself, the event happened once. Unless in some very complex cases, it is a recurring one. The person is in a situation where they're constantly being re-traumatized. But that is not always the case. Majority of the time, the event has happened once, the car accident, the war situation, this, that. And then the person re-traumatizes themselves. They hold a very staunchly held position based on ignorance, based on not wanting to move forward. And then they traumatize others. So, rehabilitation is what we need. I hope this helps.